暗黒の軍団が押し寄せる空を炎赤く赤く燃える
This is the story of the ultimate demon god. This is the story of humanity's podcast. It's Super Audio Robo Podcast Zeto! I'm Ark, that's Neff, and this is the show where we recommend you the finest mecha content for your cultural and artistic development. And in a very rare example, it's a manga this time.
Yeah, and this one is going to be way easier to go through than most of what we talked about, but...
Yeah, because we're both speed readers, as it turns out.
Yeah, because like I was telling Ark before the podcast, I read this entire thing in like a day.
Well, at least I know for like the remaining few like manga episodes when we do those, I know we won't need to take like 2 weeks in advance to prepare for such a thing.
Yeah, and also it helps that this is like a breezy read too.
Yeah, only 9 volumes of one of the most insane Mazinger Z stories ever conceived. It's Shin Mazinger ZERO.
Yeah, you wanna give the rundown on this manga, on this fucking crazy ass thing?
Yeah, let's go straight into the synopsis. This is a doozy. All right. Scientific genius Juzo Kabuto has created the ultimate achievement in science and robotics, a self-evolving super robot known as Mazinger Z. But in that self-evolution, the robot becomes a monstrous devil simply known as Zero, ending all life and becoming the only being left in the universe. And this cycle would continue, despite Koji Kabuto's efforts. Only by being sent back in time by the super robot Minerva X can he have a chance of preventing Zero's awakening. And after nearly 2,800 cycles, Minerva might have found the one timeline where Mazinger does not become a devil, but only if Koji can save the Earth from Dr. Hell against impossible odds.
That's right, we're fucking dealing with time travel now.
Time travel / multiverses, because it's kind of both.
Yeah, and this is way before like the multiverse trend, by the way.
Yeah, before MCU just like accelerated the idea into like basically existing in every facet of pop culture out there. Like, yeah. Japan was already ahead of this. Japan in general was ahead of a lot of shit that the MCU likes to be given credit for. Biggest crossover in pop culture history, my ass. We got Super Robot Wars as proof.
Yeah, that's the actual biggest in all of history right there. And also better.
Damn straight. Yeah, this is quite a wild one. Not as much, despite the insane premise, not as much to really like cover in terms of like the prehistory. Like just like a few key points to really get across. Part of it comes from the name, really, because Shin Mazinger ZERO was a new manga project in the franchise made to coincide with a similarly titled anime in 2009. That anime being, its full Japanese title as Shin Mazinger Shogeki Zihen, but generally, we always, refer to it in the shorthand as Shin Mazinger Z. The idea about, these two, this anime and this manga coming out the same year is that they were meant as, new modern reimaginings of the Mazinger Z mythos, hence the Shin prefix being applied to the title. And despite seeming pretty similar, actually wildly different. It'll be very clear, especially once we do our Shin Mazinger Z episode in the near future, just to highlight that. Yeah, there's they definitely go for a different vibe compared to this manga, because the anime was led by Yasuhiro Imagawa as director, whereas Shin Mazinger ZERO, the manga, was penned by an author-artist duo in the manga industry. Go Nagai's name is obviously on it, but that's more in the original creator context. The same way you always see Tomino's name in any Gundam anime's opening credits. Yeah, but because he didn't work on it directly, it's just crediting the guy responsible for starting the franchise in the first place.
Yeah.
The two manga responsible were Yoshiaki Tabata, who penned the story, and Yuki Yugo, who was the artist. These two, they have a bit of history of their own already. They've worked together since the late 90s. I think their first manga was called Comic Master J, and have pretty much been partners in crime ever since, with a lot of their works afterwards being very violent. You just gotta look up any of their major works that they did in the early 2000s, like Akumetsu or Wolf Guy, and even stuff after Shin Mazinger Z. One manga that I've always heard the name of but keep meaning to find time to read is Ninja Slayer, which sounds kind of right up my alley, as I am all about ninjas that forego the concept of being stealthy assassins and just the baddest motherfucking warriors in all of human history.
Yeah, I'm looking up stuff about Ninja Slayer, and just from the images alone, this looks like a very well, I understand why they got them to work on a Go Nagai property, because this feels like it fits Go Nagai style in a way.
Yes, Yugo's art style, when you look at it in the majority of their works, thick, bold outlines are present throughout, which I always feel that's a good early sign of a manga's art style trying to impart a certain level of intensity that you just don't really get if you try to do the same thing with a lot more fine, thinner outlines and details in your panels. Mm-hmm. And also, I had to also check the timeline of all the different works they did, but apparently in the couple years after they did Shin Mazinger Z, they did a prequel manga for Blackjack. So yeah, this would not be the last time that they ever did a manga that was based on a classic anime manga property from decades in the past. Mm-hmm. They actually got to work on one of Osamu Tezuka's classics. That's at least the background as far as who put this manga together. And, if you just look at any of the stuff that they have done that came before or after Shin Mazinger Z, it makes a whole lot of sense of why they would get the opportunity to do this. And while both the manga and anime stories are fairly different, there is another commonality between them, aside from, using the Shin prefix in their name, is that like any major Go Nagai story in the modern age, you gotta get a bunch of cameos in there.
Yeah.
This might be the one where I think it kind of goes beyond the scope of just being a traditional cameo, because they just bring in characters from other Go Nagai manga, and instead of just having them be oh hey, they're there kind of moment, it's no, they're actually pretty fucking pivotal to the plot. Yeah, stuff would not happen if Cutie Honey was not in this. That is real.
They are actual characters. They are not just, oh, I recognize that guy from the background. No, yeah, like you said, they're pivotal. They have pivotal roles in this story. It's wild.
Yeah, Shin Mazinger Z, the anime, also is kind of the same way, but I feel like its cameos are a lot more restrained in that they have a much more common origin point. Mm-hmm. The anime is way more focused on its violence jack cameos, mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about with the Kurogane 5, Tsubasa, and all that.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a lot crazier in Zero's case, because the cameos they are pulling from are just way more all over the place by comparison. Yeah. Because this is a dark story, and they have fucking Cutie Honey in this manga. They have the Abashiri family.
Yeah, I had to look up a lot of the cameos, because there's definitely a lot of Go Nagai's work which I have not read or seen, and it turns out there's way more than I thought in this manga.
Yeah, one of them I will be especially glad to talk about when we get into our spoiler section, because it is, I think, the one cameo where I wish the source material had completed fan subs for it, because I want to watch the whole thing now.
Oh god.
Before we get there, to finish things off, this was a 9-volume manga. It first entered publication in June of 2009, which was only 2 months after the Shin Mazinger anime began airing, so pretty close turnaround. Each chapter would be published in the Champion Red magazine, totaling at 42 chapters, ending in December of 2012. So a little over a 3.5-year run. Not too bad, all things considered. Mm-hmm. Although I'm definitely glad that we're in a situation where we can just binge read these chapters, because I can only imagine trying to follow this as it was getting published month to month would have been agonizing at times because of how long the battles go.
Oh yeah, this is one of those, I can't imagine doing this, reading this monthly. It would just drive me insane. I just wait for it to be done by then.
Yeah, I definitely find that that's, a lot easier and more sensible to do with manga compared to anime, of all things. Mm-hmm. I guess especially with, modern anime today, considering like the restraints that are like put on like episode counts and whatnot.
Yeah.
Manga, meanwhile, it's like you have no idea how long they're going to go for. Like you don't know if they're going to like when they're going to reach the end, or if they even have an end in sight and they're just going to spin their wheels forever.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole background for Shin Mazinger Z, you know, our authors, the cameos, like how many chapters it went for. We obviously got our robots and characters, but like a lot of other like Mazinger related media, it's like it's very pointless to try and just go back over every single character and robot, considering we already did that back in episode 1 of this very podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But we can at least cover a few things that are somewhat different. And we'll do that with our only primary mecha that we're going to talk about in this section, and that is Mazinger Z itself. Like, yeah, it's the classic super robot, but like, what's different about it? A lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
This is the most different Mazinger the robot has ever been compared to any other series.
Yes, because for one, a rather silly detail, its name actually stands for it's an acronym now. It stands for Multidimensional Automaton Zillion Infinity Neural Generative Exterminate Reverter.
Which, sure.
That's real.
Yeah, that is... Ark is not making that up. That is the actual name. It is so ridiculous. I don't know why they decided now to do that, but sure.
Like, it was way more sensible when you looked at, like, how the name was originally like come up with in the 70s, and the fact it was supposed to be a play on words of being read as like being either like a devil, you know, like a Majin, or like reading the middle of it as Shin, you know, like, which can also refer to like a god. Like it was a name that was supposed to work on 2 levels, but they decided to go this route, just add this extra thing on top because Juzo Kabuto is a fucking psycho. Because this robot has been reimagined with an overwhelming dark power deep in its core, containing 7 black boxes that when unlocked grant the robot powers beyond that of any other robot in the Mazinger franchise, let alone probably any other super robot series out there, barring maybe Demon Bane still has a beat to an extent, but I don't know, I'm not playing that fucking visual novel.
Yeah, I feel like also this is the strongest Mazinger has ever been too, or maybe just...
It definitely is, and that's not even counting the sequel manga where it goes even further beyond. Oh, this fucking thing. Like, it's so strong, overwhelming, even more than Dr. Hell's, like, strongest forces, and kind of as, like, described in our synopsis, when all those black boxes are activated, Z becomes zero, and with it, the world is destroyed. So, yeah, that's the real threat that you have to worry about. It's not Dr. Hell winning.
No.
Even though Dr. Hell winning is more or less the same outcome.
It both ends in bad places.
It's at least important to note that when it does become zero, there is like a noticeable like change in like the style of how Mazinger Z looks. Because in its default form, you know, it still looks like the classic super robot that we all know. You know, like the same, like, especially based on like how always was portrayed like in the manga typically. You know, like the black and white and like red color palette. You know, the same like head shape, all that stuff, all the familiar abilities. But Zero, like when it goes full demonic, it becomes noticeably like more aerodynamic, like in its form, and like the mouth guard, like clearly mutates to look like a bunch of like very sharp teeth.
Yeah,
it's this was kind of like a niche thing that like I remembered seeing like, you know, pictures of this before in the past when I was kind of in a phase of like obsessing over like robot Soul of Chogokin and other figures, while also lamenting the fact I would never have the money to buy any of them. But I think there was like a line called Future with FEW and then TURE, where it was like very weird slimmed up designs of like classic super robots, like that kind of have like a weirdly more detailed look to them that kind of belies the fact that these are super robots that had like originally very simple, you know, basic shape looking designs to them.
Right.
And like if you look up like their version of Mazinger Z, like their design of it, it's not too far off from how Zero looks when it is in full demon god mode. Like, it's especially with the mouth guard when you see just kind of how, like, very slimmed up and, like, demonic mouth looking it is. That's, like, the main thing that's different. Like, the mechanical beasts, those are all the same. The other allied super robots, those are all the same. Well, I guess Hell King Gordon or Gordon Hell is technically different because it's a lot more insane. But that's more, we'll have more to say about that in the latter half of the show, really. It doesn't factor into, like, the first half of the story. Just that, you know, for a Mazinger Z this powerful, it only makes sense that it's going to have to go up against an even more powerful final boss mecha.
And if you want to hear our thoughts on that, then either read the manga or just listen to our spoiler thoughts later, and then you'll know.
Yeah, we'll have a lot.
Yeah.
But with that being the only mecha that needed to be talked about, like, we at least have a few, like, major characters that do need, like, special mention because of how things differ for them in this story in a very major way. First, obviously, our hero Koji Kabuto, pilot of the Mazinger Z, and basically tasked with having to, like, prevent Z from awakening into the demon god known as Mazinger Zero. He has failed every time thus far, almost 2,800 times, and has basically had to, like, get sent back in time via, like, Rust Hurricane in order to transmit his essence and consciousness across, like, photon particles, because this manga definitely likes to make up a lot of bullshit regarding how, like, photonic energy works and how that factors into, like, the passage of time. It does lead to a very battle-experienced Koji Kabuto, where even if he is not, like, 100% cognizant of the fact that he has done this shit thousands of times, like, he gets flashbacks or premonitions very frequently about stuff that is going to happen and, like, makes plans that are built around that knowledge, even if he is the only one that actually knows it, because he's the only one seeing this shit. Like, you know, like, at this point, like, when you see, like, where the story goes, in most cases, he is not that fazed or surprised by, like, what Dr. Hell and his minions might try to do to him, because he's ready.
Also, this is the most, how do I explain this? This Koji Kabuto feels less like a Go Nagai character and more like he walked out of the Robo manga. Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh yeah, he is he goes beyond, like, he still has his strong sense of justice, but I feel like in order to match the stakes put forth by this manga, yeah, he feels a lot more like he came from Robo, because there was a lot more of a violent streak in, like, the intensity of his actions.
He is way more intense than he has ever been. I feel like we can probably get the sense that this manga has taken Mazinger and taken everything in that series and cranked the like, insanity and intensity meter up to, like, 120%.
Yes. Also, you mentioning Robo just made me realize that, like aspects of Mazinger Zero have been featured in some of the more recent Super Robot Wars, and I'm pretty sure that reminded me. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure in one of those games they basically did the same thing as the original idea for Majin Kaiser, where Zero was basically awakened by Geta Rays.
Yeah, no, that was like I forgot, it was like T or X, which. Yeah, they tied it in to get a Robo again.
Because, of course, like, it's always fucking Get a Race in a crossover.
Yeah, because, as we'll get to later, it's kind of hard to tie in Mazinger Zero to other series. If they try to play it straight, it's kind of impossible, and actually.
Yes, which we might as well, like, continue on, like, having to get into, like, more of our characters and just how they factor into the story being able to work in the first place. And that is Minerva X, which is a character that exists to act as a deep pull for a one-episode character from the original Mazinger Z anime of the same name. The partner robot for Mazinger Z, known as Minerva X, which was, like, in the anime, like, the concept was that Juzo Kabuto, before he died, he had put together plans to create, like, an actual partner robot for Mazinger Z. You know, it was not supposed to be Aphrodite A. It just turned out to be that way, you know, because Professor Yumi and his daughter was off, like, you know, doing their own thing with, like, the Photon Power Labs. But Minerva X was basically supposed to be the true partner to Mazinger Z. Dr. Hell ended up stealing those plans after his death and wasn't able to fully decipher, like, how every aspect of it worked, including like her photon engine black box. So he had no choice but to basically design it exactly to spec, not realizing that after building her, she was no longer going to be fully in his control because of the whole partner circuit and like photon engine built into her core that makes it so that she is loyal to Z. Minerva X in this manga basically takes that core concept and turns her into the most tragic heroine of any super robot story, really, who is trying desperately across time to get the robot she loves to not destroy the entire fucking universe.
Yeah, it is the deepest pull they could possibly make for a character in a manga that's already filled with deep pulls.
Yes, and throughout this whole manga, like, she has a very obvious, like, humanoid form. So, like, I guess in this case, she's more like an android in this case. Because in the original, she was, like, super robot-sized. But her backstory and everything she goes through differs quite a bit, even though you do get some plot points, especially with kind of very early on in like the main timeline that this manga focuses on, is that you do get to see the moment of her activation, in which it starts off very similar to how it was in the original anime, where Dr. Hell has finished building Minerva X, activated her, and gives her task of like, you know, like stopping Mazinger Z, kill Koji, except she can't do it because she loves Mazinger. In a way that, you know, I put this in our spoilers notes, but I'm just going to get this out of the way. I'm going to say that Minerva X represents a new classification of romantic attraction that deserves to be formalized. She is robosexual.
That is not a joke. That is not an exaggeration. She literally has a very intense reaction to being around Mazinger, is what I'll say.
Especially, even more so, if the Pilder is in Mazinger, and if Koji is in the Pilder.
All this manga.
It's hard to tell sometimes whether it is a case of she loves Koji or she loves Mazinger. Answer yes.
Yes.
Moving on. And basically, the final two characters, ones we got to talk about that are more or less responsible for putting like the timelines in the predicament that they are, we gotta talk about Juzo Kabuto and how much of a horrific fucking asshole he is.
Yeah, this is the worst version of Juzo Kabuto as well, in many, many ways.
Yeah, although maybe in one timeline he kind of starts to redeem himself at the end. I don't know, but like, this is very much a Juzo Kabuto that plays into the mad scientist angle so much that you could say that he is deliberately so meant to be more of a direct mirror to Dr. Hell, because Dr. Hell also gets like a huge fucking glow up in terms of power and just raw threatening aura than any other version of him prior. Like, Juzo basically designed Mazinger Z with all the black boxes and shit that would turn it into a demon god. Dr. Hell is swole as fuck and is able to just absolutely like turn the entire earth into an apocalyptic hellscape.
Yeah,
it does make you wonder, like in what way, like, of all these outcomes, like, what really is worse? Dr. Hell winning or Zero winning? It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, it's not a great choice for anybody in this manga.
At least all the other characters that you know are still there in there and are still very true to themselves all the same. You know, Saika, Professor Yumi, this podcast's first personal favorite, Boss.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, Dr. Hell's cronies, Baron Ashura, Count Brocken, still the same as always.
Yeah.
Especially Ashura in their undying devotion.
They are still the same characters as they've always been. There have been no changes.
Yep, you remember our Majin Kaiser episode? Like, a lot of this shit still applies to them.
Yep.
even the way Yugo draws the characters, I realized, especially with the bold outlines, actually gave me a lot of Majin Kaiser vibes, you know, like, as far as like reminding me of how the characters in that OVA looked. But that's our cast. You know, short as it may have been to talk about it, it's still kind of important to get like the key differentiators out of the way. So why do we recommend Shin Mazinger Z, this batshit fucking story? I think it kind of goes without saying. It carries the hallmark of like Go Nagai's original works, even though this is like, because Go Nagai, even during this point in 2009, he'd still be working on his own manga on his own anyway, like whether it's like penning the story or doing both the story and art. But like Tabata and Yugo both do a very good job of like capturing the finer details of Go Nagai's work in their own way. Like they have like the dynamic action that like was defining of Go Nagai's original Mazinger Z manga. The character cameos, obviously, and even moments where they get like they even accurately get the tonal whiplash of serious violent imagery with character gags.
Yeah, it turns out they were perfect for this.
They do a good job, maybe too good of a job in some cases, in which we kind of need to get into like a quick caveat. Like this first volume, it goes a bit too dark in conveying the stakes that are at play with Mazinger Zero.
It's too much.
It's and I say the first volume because almost nothing about the chapters that are compiled in there are something where I think anyone that decides to just like start reading it on the whim and goes through like those first 3 to 4 chapters, I would not be surprised if they felt like turned off by it because of just some of the grimdark shit that they end up throwing like right in your face in order to sell the idea that in every single one of these timelines something has to go wrong that causes Koji and like Mazinger to lose it and become a devil. And it's like, we get that this is kind of a cyclical thing. You don't need to show us in excruciating detail how that happens. You could just like explain that in like brief snippets, which would have been a lot better than what Juzo Kabuto ends up doing.
Yeah, I'm going to have to like bring up a content warning for this first volume because it does have some pretty gross sexual assault in it, and I would recommend,
yes,
and you've done the same, you've recommended this to me too, to skip the first volume entirely. Just unless you're really curious, just go straight to the second volume. You are going to lose nothing. Like you'll get everything right away from reading the second volume.
Yeah, like what our synopsis basically described, like that basically means you don't need to read the first volume to get the gist of it. You like have the synopsis go into volume 2, you instantly know that like that's where the real plot starts.
Yeah. And
yeah, because the rest of it is absolutely an enjoyable read, even when it brings back like dark moments later in the story. They're nowhere near as gross as what happens in volume 1 because they end up building more to like a sense of catharsis once you do get to the end of the journey. I think like in our notes, like you described it, I think in a more succinct way, in that like it definitely portrays like a sense of like hope against all impossible odds as like the main thing to hold on to.
Yeah, also like we said, volume 1 is as bad as it goes, and while it looks like everything is pretty dark, like I mentioned, what like makes us stand out more than like most other grimdark works is that there is that feeling, like you mentioned, of catharsis, like a ray of hope at the end, which brings us all together. And by the end, you're not feeling like, you're feeling like you went through a journey with these characters, and like you're glad that things work out.
I often like to think of a line from The First Beautiful Joe. It's mostly in regards to plot twists, but I think it also works well in this case. And that is the idea that things always have to go wrong once before you get to the happy ending.
Yeah, like just trust us, like things are not as bad as they are. Even if like it looks like hopeless in the manga, it doesn't like always. I have a lot to say in the spoiler manga about this, so I'm holding back a little. Because
after our past few episodes, this is clearly proving to be like the shortest our non-spoiler section is ever going to fucking be.
Yeah.
So I guess as we're finishing it up, it's like there is like another thing that is like really entertaining about this manga that is worth going through on top of like the sense of hope that you get amidst all the grim darkness, is that this is something that is actually like exaggerated even more in the sequel manga of all things, but Zero has elements of like of a meta narrative to it. So, like aspects to its plot that feel highly reverent of like not just Mazinger as like a super robot in universe, but like Mazinger in terms of its history and legacy as a pop culture icon. There's the middle point of the story that I think you could clue into very easily as to what that might be, but like that's generally like what sticks in my mind as far as like where some of the meta aspects to the plot come in with Zero. And it's really good because I mean hell, even then, like, bringing back Minerva X of all things demonstrates like a knowledge of the Mazinger franchise itself that you would be surprised that anyone even recalls, considering that anime was 92 episodes in its time. This manga was worked on by people that you can clearly tell they weren't just given all the key notes by Go Nagai and told to go nuts. It's like, no, they actually know Mazinger. They actually love this, and they're doing their take on it.
There's a real reverence to like Mazinger and just Go Nagai's work in general,
which is always like one of the best things that you can have in your favor when doing an adaptation of Go Nagai's classic stories.
Yeah.
So with that said, we've said about like the volumes for this manga. It had 9 in total, not the longest manga in the world, but it's still fairly meaty, all things considered, 42 chapters. But like outside Japan, I did do a brief check to see like what the state of physical releases were. Obviously, there would be physical releases in Japan in its original language, but for international releases that got a physical like paperback release, the only one I seemed to be able to find was one that existed in Spanish. So this is basically one of those manga that for most international audiences, if you're needing it in English, that does mean you're going to be going through scanlations for this one. But fortunately, not only have all 42 chapters been translated for like several years now, but like the quality of it is still very good all the same, especially because like the manga, like when you look at how like the paneling is set up and like how like words are, like how Japanese characters are written for certain emphasis, the scanlators actually took the time to like do their typesetting to match the placement and like boldness of those Japanese characters as accurately as possible in a lot of cases. Which is like that's a very commendable thing, and that definitely makes the act of like reading this manga equally as enjoyable, because you wouldn't want it would kind of deflate it if it was like just a bunch of like white highlight boxes all over the pages that just had like plain text font showing like this is what the word is. It's like, that's no fun. You want the letters all over the place when it says Big Bang Punch or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, exactly. You want to be big and bombastic like Mazinger is.
Damn straight. As for those scanlations, it's easy enough to find them. Most people, I think it's no surprise, like, where they go to, like, get their manga of choice to read, especially if it's a situation where it is not being, like, officially, like, published in English through, like, typical companies. So, look on your favorite manga reader site of choice for, like, unofficial works. I'm sure you'll find it. That's where I read it. And as an addition to that, if Shin Mazinger Zero leaves you wanting more, read the sequel. Shin Mazinger Zero versus the Great General of Darkness. Where have I heard that name before? Anyway, it pushes things even further. Like, kind of as you would expect for a lot of, like, Mazinger Z stories. It's like, if you have Mazinger Z, the expectation is at some point you have to do the Great Mazinger story as a follow-up. And that's more or less what this one is. Like, it incorporates Great Mazinger's, like, core plot and ideas into the overall saga, and the finale is nothing short of incredible. It's like like, even though we're not doing an episode like an official one that's on our list, like, with how quickly you got through reading Shin Mazinger Zero in preparation for this episode, I would not be surprised if like you have a similarly quick turnaround time if you decide to read Zero versus the Great General of Darkness, because that climax needs to be seen to really appreciate it. It's like, it will reaffirm your love for super robots and the mecha genre as a whole. It is that powerful.
I am very excited to actually read it through myself eventually.
It's similar vibes as well, where it is like, just like with this manga, it gets pretty dark at times, outrageous as well sometimes with gags in like the most inopportune times, but like with Zero, there's always that ray of hope, like that sense of catharsis you're going to get at the end after going through things going wrong so many times that they will eventually go right, and it will be glorious.
Hell yeah. Also, one more thing. You're probably never gonna get an anime about this. I would be shocked if we ever get an anime adaptation of this entire work. So,
Nope. But when you read this manga, you'll definitely, if you're like me, you'll definitely find yourself visualizing how this would have looked in color and like what music would have been playing during it, because there are some sections where they straight up just like have the lyrics to Jam Project songs in the background. I shit you not.
it kind of
It's
rules.
it's like these two mangaka knew that they were stuck making a manga, but still wanted to make it with the idea of, okay, but what if it were like an anime?
Yeah, you can definitely see it a lot.
So with that said, we're ready to get into the real meat of this episode, our spoiler discussion. You know, if you've not read this manga yet, go ahead and do it now. Again, compared to watching even a 13-episode anime, if you're a good speed reader, you can get through this shit real fast. Only 9 volumes, technically 8 if you take our advice to skip the first one.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you want to hear us talk about just all the insane shit that happens, stick around, and we'll see you on the other side.
See y'all later. All right, now that we're on the full discussion, I didn't read the first volume, so go ahead and talk about it.
Yeah, I was more or less going to start with what happens in Volume 1. Never mind. What happens in Volume 2? Actually, there is at least one thing I can get into about Volume 1 that is actually a positive, and that is what happens in the very first chapter, where it's that bit of Koji just kind of walking across the wasteland, kind of realizing that he made a mistake not trying to get into Mazinger to control it because now it has destroyed the world, and that it's the first instance of seeing Minerva X use Rust Hurricane to send Koji's photons back through time.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, basically Mazinger materialize after the fact. And the lyrics to Kanjite Night, the first opening from Shin Mazinger Z, the anime, is just being displayed across all the panels. And it even syncs up perfectly when it gets to the part of the lyrics where it goes, Majin Go, and Koji is screaming it as he is charging forward at Zero. That's it. That's actually, now that I think about it, that's the only chapter of Volume 1 that you should actually read. That's the one. Otherwise, the rest of it, you have to just build up to Sayaka getting tentacle raped by Juzo's Dr. Octopus arms. It's terrible. Moving on to Volume 2, where
please.
Buff Dr. Hell is actually real, and he will hurt you.
No, I hate him. I hate it so much. Why did they make him so buff?
Oh, man, remember back when we did the Majin Kaiser episode where we initially thought that when he took off the robe that he was actually shirtless?
Yeah.
Everything about this manga feels like it was a direct challenge at all of our thoughts when we were watching all those other Mazinger Z related anime from before this.
Yeah, it's oh, you wanted him shirtless, huh? Well, here you go. And it's no, not like that. Not like that.
He's not shirtless, but it's skin tight. You look at these abs. Look at them. So the idea when you get into Volume 2 is that this is the latest cycle that Minerva X has basically started after sending Koji back in time, and things are noticeably very different for her. The part where she is built by Dr. Hell, that's still the same. That has been the case for several hundred cycles up to this point. But what she notices that being different is that Koji is fighting with Mazinger, and Mazinger has not destroyed the world. Huh, that's weird.
Yeah.
But she gets sent in by Dr. Hell with the intention of being you're going to find Koji Kabuto and assassinate him, even though she's clearly not going to do that. And Baron Ashura, I think, suspected as much, rightfully so, which is why they send in the Gamiya Q3 triplets. And this is a classic fight that has been in multiple Mazinger Z stories all the way back to the original manga.
Yeah.
I think this is the best Gamiya Q3 fight ever put into any version of those stories, because Koji is ready for that shit.
Yeah, he does not even entertain. He's not fooled. He's right away just says, "Hey, so you're here to kill me, right?" And it's
Geez. And then revealing, "Oh yeah, I'm a high school student. Here I am, concealed carrying a fucking photon laser. Bisect you down the middle, bitch." It's great too, especially because of the context where it's like first Minerva X shows up as like an exchange student, which everyone goes gaga over because they're like, oh shit, platinum blonde.
Yeah.
And then the Q3 they'll like come in and everyone goes ape shit as well. And that is like like Koji just knows so well. Oh, something's up. Something is way off about this. And as you'll find, almost like it was a much needed way of showing that this story is not going to be super dark all the time, is that Volume 2 is very gag focused.
There's a lot of gags, which surprised me.
A lot of gags of the horny variety, which I need to confess, I realize I am a very awful person if the horniness on display with Minerva and Koji, followed by Sayaka's rampage after witnessing this, just never fails to make me cackle like a madman.
Okay, but to be fair, like, this manga is very horny. But at least, like, this isn't the sexual assault stuff that happens in the first volume.
Yeah, this is more like Minerva jumps into the powder with Koji in a way that is very provocative, teases Sayaka with, like, sticking her tongue out as the canopy closes, and it is enough to have Sayaka make Aphrodite A look scary for once in its existence.
Also, like, this is kind of where I was like, I saw, like, Minerva X do, like, the tongue, her sticking her tongue out and being all playful, and I was like, okay, yeah, I get this character now, and I kind of appreciate how much of a giant dork she is, actually. I thought they were going to go for more of a Rei Ayami, like, type of character, you know, the kind of silent.
Yeah.
But they went a different direction with it, and I feel like it works for this manga specifically.
She has very human-like emotions and passions. It's just that a lot of those passions are all directed towards Mazinger Z.
Oh, yeah.
Which I like to think, at least, on top of the fact that I already coined the term robosexuality and whatnot, it's like, more or less, she is expressing the same feelings about Mazinger that we all do deep in our hearts. Maybe not to the extent that we love it like we want to fuck it, but we all admire Mazinger just the same for being an amazing super robot. Because, like, the major fight that goes on is, like, Mazinger Z does put up, like, a hell of a fight against, like the mechanical beast that Baron Ashura sends in. And then Sayaka obviously comes in and is just going absolute fucking ape shit in Aphrodite. It's just a shame that, like, the robot sustains a fatal wound, which means Koji obviously still has to, you know, finish the job like normal.
Yeah.
But at least enough of the misunderstanding gets cleared up, and you get a very, very touching scene after the fight is all finished with Mazinger walking through the streets, Aphrodite in its arms, and, like, the townspeople, like, everyone in Atami just cheering on Koji and Sayaka, thanking them for stopping Baron Ashura, even going so far to be, like, beyond grateful. It's like, it's okay, it's all right if we lose a power line or two. You stop those guys. You're the best. And it's like, this is true appreciation for what a hero does.
Oh, yeah. Like, just, it's a nice scene that, like, kind of shows, I feel like this just shows, like, oh yeah, there's still hope for these people. The world's fucked, but they're still, like, hopeful, and Mazinger is their one and true hope. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And even with how the story is framed up to this point in this volume, you don't even realize that the rest of the world outside Japan is turbo fucked.
Yeah.
Like everything from Minerva's eyes actually seems like it is totally normal, especially as she is like, you get an onsen scene, as you do.
Of course you do.
Nice Devilman references, though. You know, Lucifer on the women's side, Amon on the men's side, and the three professors arguably being the biggest horn dogs out of the entire cast, really, considering what they put Koji and Boss up to.
Yeah.
But it's more like what happens after, where it is like they know about what happened with, like, Minerva X, the fact she was made by Dr. Hell, but ultimately could not be controlled, and, you know, like they have, like, basically just a big welcoming party for her where, like, she feels like she is formally welcomed into the community, kind of showing that, yeah, this is we'll find out in the following volumes how exactly the world got fucked up.
Yeah.
But like when you see that, you can understand why everyone in this town is like feels like the closest tight-knit community imaginable.
Yeah, they all feel like they're just ready to like go to bat for each other. And they do later on.
Oh yeah. They're even willing to fucking take up arms and kill motherfuckers to protect their home if they need to.
Including the children.
Hell yeah.
Oh.
So, moving on to volume 3 in this case, starts with
this is
not immediately on the very first chapter, but for most of volume 3, it starts what I like to consider a conveniently improbable method of exposition.
It is the most ridiculous series.
Everyone watches a documentary that details the backstory in such intense detail that it is impossible to see it as a movie any longer. They say it's like a CG recreation, but it's like, bro, this is still the exact same art style. This is just a flashback.
This is literally just a flashback, but they decide to contextualize it in like universe in the most ridiculous way I've ever seen in my life. Like, jeez.
And the funny thing too, the whole movie watching conceit, this isn't the only time that happens.
No, this happens a second time.
The second time is arguably sillier, and it knows that. But hey, we get to see Honey Kisaragi doing well for herself as a pop star.
Yep, Cutie Honey's here.
Performing as part of like Fuji Pop, which I had to double check to make sure the fact that it's called Fuji Pop. Clearly, that is in reference to the fact that, like, when the Mazinger Z anime aired in the 70s, it was on Fuji TV.
Oh, I didn't get that, but that's cute. That's a cute reference.
I had a feeling that was possibly what I was referring to, because it's like, Fuji seems very specific. That has to be like a meta, like a reference to like network or something. Right. It turns out, yeah, it was. So, getting into the documentary, The Great Mazin War, swole Dr. Hell in the Oval Office is a fucking menacing aura. Doubly so when he takes the president's balls hostage before crushing them. This manga's idea of what normal is not normal.
Yeah, I especially love what he says when he grabs the president by the balls. And you call yourself a man? Have you actually got any balls? And then he gives an entire speech about how world domination is a man's dream while holding the president by the balls.
Over his head. Man has a strong grip.
He has
And really, I just love the fact, like, I wrote down taking the president's balls hostage because that's just what one of the president's, like, Secret Service agents literally says as he's pointing a gun at Dr. Hell. And is like, oh no, the president's crotch has been taken hostage. It's like, not the president? You focus specifically on his body part? His sperm is that important?
And then he just swings the president like a weapon and cuts the guys in half or some shit.
Yeah, but, but not before crushing his dick and balls completely.
Oh my
poor
God.
Jim Mazinger. Because yes, his design is based on Jim Mazinger from Violence Jack. Which makes sense. This was in 2009.
Yeah.
We were in the first term of the Obama administration.
Oh yeah.
There was no fucking way they were ever going to get away with like an actual like spot-on recreation of President Obama. They were not going to do that.
So why not just have Jim Mazinger instead as a stand-in?
Yeah, that works. That fucking works. And then he tries to nuke Dr. Hell, but whoops, the Wanda Bardos in Dr. Hell's hand. Yeah, it controls all modern electronics, including nukes.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, USA.
Well, so much for that, I guess.
Yeah, so, like, as this shit goes on, and you see what Dr. Hell is doing as he's just decimating the entire world, like it gets to a bit as well where it shows Mazinger Z, like, getting the finishing touches put on it by Juzo Kabuto, where, like, he, like, collapses, coughs up blood, and dies before handing over the robot to Koji. And it does prompt Minerva to, like, ask the question, considering the events of Volume 1, if Juzo Kabuto in this world was actually not an awful piece of shit. Yes?
Fair.
Maybe?
It's a fair question.
It's like, she basically goes, like, he seemed to be, like, an egomaniac, like, mad scientist, and also kind of a lech. And Sayaka just goes, yeah, he kind of was all of that, but he was also a good grandpa. And it's like, how does that justify it?
I don't know.
But to give another example, like during this volume of like scenes that have a very clear darkness to it, but are much more effective of getting the point across than anything in volume 1, is the scene of like some unnamed kingdom, like all of like its nobles and citizens being stripped of their clothes and like huddled in like the pitch blackness as like giant robot hands come down to basically like scoop them up and like crush them to like harvest their parts or whatever. Is like, it is like a genuinely terrifying image, really. Like nothing about, like obviously the part where they're all naked is very, you know, degrading to them, especially when you realize that some of those characters also come from Cutie Honey. Yeah, because I've read the manga and I know what those are referencing. But it's otherwise the sort of thing where it does a better job of justifying how dark that shit is, because it's designed to make you hate who the actual villain of this story is, and that is Dr. Hell.
It is a horrifying sequence, and it does it well, better than anything, like you mentioned in volume 1. It's like, oh yeah, this is bad.
Because by this point, several billion of the population are all dead. The survivors are basically taking old, outdated electronics and like vehicles that cannot be hijacked by Dr. Hell's like staff, and basically are retreating to Japan because that's where Mazinger is, and that's the only hope they have. Mm-hmm. So what follows, as far as like the final fight that you see in this volume, but not necessarily end of the backstory, is like the start of the Great Mazin War itself, where Koji is leading the Mazinger army. You know, him, Sayaka, Boss, and like the other OG manga specific characters, which includes Lori and Roll, for those that remember the Mazin Kaiser OVA where those were featured. Mm-hmm. And like all of them basically like fighting to buy the Photon Power Labs enough time to put out a massive photonic barrier that can shield all of Japan from Dr. Hell. And it basically works, even though it's like everyone except Boss and Sayaka dies. Koji also survives just long enough that he is able to see Dr. Hell face to face, and in giving us what we actually wanted from the end of Majin Kaiser, we get a fucking fist fight between the two of them.
Boy, do we.
Like, Koji just steps out and is like, let's fucking go, you old piece of shit.
And we get a full page spread.
And you're also seeing during this fight how they're like, because of the fact that this is like the latest timeline out of nearly 2800, and like so much photonic energy from Koji's future is being sent back to the past across different realities, is that you are seeing double exposures of like different events that would have been happening in that same place overlapping with Koji, which is why his punches are now massively superpowered because they have the aura of Mazinger's actual arms.
Yeah, it's like, it's ridiculous, but fuck it, I'll go with it. It kind of rules.
Too bad he dies.
Yeah, he fucking dies. He actually dies. But he's alive somehow.
Yes, somehow, which Volume 4 handily explains as the documentary viewing gets interrupted due to Dr. Hell's forces launching their next attack. A joint operation between Baron Ashura and Bracken. Ashura, who, by the way, has like gotten majorly fucked up that their face is now fused to the top of a mecha beast, not unlike King Hellgordon from the end of Majin Kaiser.
Yeah.
So now foot soldiers are passing through the photonic barrier, which, as it turns out, a detail that they explain about that barrier is that the reason that mecha beasts still show up inside the barrier is because of, it's not perfect because it's more like a sort of a weave pattern of photonic energy, so it takes literally 1 week for a Kikaiju to actually get through, not unlike the fact that it was 1 week an episode of the original anime.
It's like we have a monster of the week.
Yep, and because foot soldiers are coming through first, Boss, Nuke, and Mucha, and all the townsfolk go straight to where the Iron Masks are coming through in order to face them off. And, you know, we're appreciators of Boss. Yeah. We like it when they get to, you know, show their stuff. Even if they do get demoralized seeing the people they know turn into Iron Masks, because that's what Dr. Hell was doing with all the corpses of the people he slaughtered.
Yeah, we get to see a bunch of zombified people with their brains out, and it is a terrifying imagery, including the teacher we saw in the beginning of Volume 2. So, which kind of gives a pause.
Definitely. At least Minerva knows what needs to be done, that she can like just go full robot mode. But even then, it's like, yeah, even then she can't keep doing that for too long because she still feels way more human despite like her, like the fact that she is a robot. But this is the sort of thing where like you finally get the explanation behind the idea of Koji Kabuto dying in that fight with Dr. Hell. As it turns out, he did die. That is absolutely true. He was deemed clinically dead, except because of all the time travel shenanigans and double exposures overlapping with the current Koji, basically caused his vitals to go to a standstill that, what was it? I always remember it from the movie Reanimator, where they always go on about like the time of brain death being 6 to 12 minutes. Yeah, I guess at some point, like that time to brain death basically got put to a standstill, that Professor Yumi was like, all right, we have a chance now. We're going to rebuild him as the most insane version of Koji Kabuto in any Mazinger story. The man dies, has his brain put into a robot body provided by the creator of Steel Jeeg, Machine Father, which makes sense because Steel Jeeg, it was a case of, the hero was actually the robot. He turned into the head that combined with all the other parts. And then for good measure, he gets the same atmospheric element fixation device that Cutie Honey uses, which allows it to basically transform matter particles around him, basically giving him his original body. Majin Flash!
Yeah, even the way he like bumps his fists together is, I think, the same way Jeeg does it in the show. Or
yes, he does. Yes. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it is so insane. Just how many different elements they just like from different shows or manga they put into this one version of Koji. Like, this man is dead, but nope, he's too hot-blooded to fucking die.
And Sayaka's even so happy about it, she doesn't even care he's naked with his dick out on display.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, I'd probably do the same.
I mean, yeah.
And that explains why Koji is back and more powerful than ever and is able to sustain a fuck ton of damage as he is fighting, like, Baron Ashura's final form. And as that whole fight is happening, like, Boss and Minerva, they're fortunately not having to fight off against the Iron Masks on their own because all the warriors are here. They're pulling their weight. Cutie Honey, the Abashiri family, Kekko Kamen, Maboroshi Pansy, the Ninja Dragon, Aztec Kaiser, everyone is here.
It's literally everyone. Like, my God. Like,
the only ones that aren't here are Devilman, but I think that's because if Devilman was actually real and not an in-universe manga as they describe, this whole plot would have been over.
It's I think this is how you could tell, oh yeah, these people who made this manga they're kind of fans of Gonagai. I think they like his mangas quite a bit.
When they're able to like reference like the few live action works Gonagai worked on, like the Ninja Dragon and Aztec Kaiser, they are real ones.
Yeah, exactly.
But obviously, with everyone, throwing in their lot to defend their home against Dr. Hell's forces, Sayaka obviously has to do something. She especially is determined to not let Koji fight senselessly at the risk of dying again. She already went through that once. She doesn't want it to happen again. And fortunately, she gets a new robot to do that. Although it's with the biggest caveats assigned to it. This is one where, like, I sympathize with, like, how you feel about this, but kind of with what I described in Volume 2, I think I am also willing to admit that I am also an awful person for kind of appreciating how stupid this is. Because she gets a new pilot, like, plug suit. It is the most absurd plug suit ever conceived. It technically existed, like, the outfit design itself existed in Majin Saga, but considering how much Eva fetishized pilot suits from 1995 onward, this feels like an explicit challenge at that.
Yeah,
because there is nothing except black latex bits to cover up the naughty areas.
This doesn't, like, ruin anything for me. This is just kind of an eye roll for me, but the one that got me the most is when they just got the plugs up into her cooch, and I'm just like, this is just your fetish. You're just putting your fucking fetish in the manga now. Which,
it's definitely the three professors fetish.
Yes.
It's definitely theirs.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like, you know what it is, actually? Yeah. This reminds me of, like, this always gets back to why I've always fucking hated Darling in the Franxx. Just to get this as an aside, is the fact that everyone makes the joke, and is why I always, like, I never even gave that the 3-episode test like I do most things. I was like, no, fuck this. I'm out before even watching the second, because the whole pilot position that like both pilots need to be in, making it look like, haha, they're doing it doggy style. Isn't that funny? And it's like, bitch, this would make more sense if you were doing this as like a porn parody, and if you were to make it worthwhile, you'd go the extra step to make it so that in order to unlock like the ultimate final attack you need to beat the monster of the week, they have to achieve climax.
Yeah.
It's like, motherfucker, you are doing like the lamest wink wink nudge nudge ever. At least in this manga, when Sayaka plugs her suit into the you-know-what areas, Artemis A just fucking splooshes all over the goddamn hangar. That's something.
I guess it's something.
But yes, I understand why it would make your eyes roll. But as I described before, especially with like the cheesecake stuff in Volume 2, it just makes me laugh for how stupid it is.
It is very stupid. Like I said, this doesn't like ruin the experience. This is just one of those things where I'm like, okay, guys, maybe dial it down just a bit. That's it.
Maybe a smidgen.
Maybe a smidgen.
Yes.
Like, we didn't need the plugs. Yeah.
Alas, as the fight goes on, Artemis A, like I do really love, as an aside, like when Artemis A like fully like sorties into battle. I do think this is actually like the best robot that Sayaka ever pilots, especially in this manga where it has the full on angel wings. Like, it sells the angel motif that I identified with Sayaka's robots, like I think better than any of the others she's piloted. Aphrodite, Diana, all that stuff. And going up against Count Brocken, she also is briefly hit with like the horror of being confronted by by Lori and Roll also being converted into iron masks and like basically taunting her as they're like, oh, being a slave to Dr. Hell is so wonderful, as they point their guns at each other, and is like basically trying to goad Sayaka into surrendering, and does admittedly a pointless move, but like I'm pretty sure she did it anyway, just knowing full well it would be dramatic. Just getting out of the robot and then whipping out a photon laser beam to just put the two out of their misery and just shit talk Brocken the whole time.
Which, hell yeah, it doesn't even like barely even works on her. She's like, oh, I already know this is bullshit. I know they wouldn't do this if they had their like free will.
Yeah, and meanwhile, getting back to Mazinger, like wrapping up like Koji's fight against Ashura, which goes real fucking hard considering like he gets like so many needles coated in super alloy Z, just puncturing wounds all over, which, as it turns out, is going to be something of a problem for the next couple volumes, because that means the previously thought invincible Mazinger Z is going to be no longer invincible. But Koji is able to pull through with a very daring, like, bear hug of the Kikaiju and just point blank breast fire the damn thing.
Yeah, which is also like we do get like Koji gets a flash during the fight where he gets pincered by Baron Ashura and I think dies, but that's like a hint of his powers later that the powers that'll pop up.
Yeah, it's another example of experiences from previous cycles overlapping in the exact passage of time. It becomes, I think, a bit more clear once you get to like the final volume and like it shows off its big Deus Ex Machina. But the idea is more like timelines and multiverses and all this stuff in this manga is basically operates on like an XY graph.
Yeah,
it's best to think of the Y graph as like the passage of time, and X is like the different like cycles essentially. And yeah, he basically got a glimpse at the right moment he needed to of what happened in the previous cycle when fighting this version of Ashura. So he knew how to get around that, cook Ashura completely, and even like in the lead up to this, you get Ashura just daydreaming in the middle of battle of Dr. Hell praising them. Just so precious. They really are the most pitiable villain in the super robot genre.
I can't believe they were a puppy girl boy this whole time. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna walk.
You're not sorry.
I'm not sorry. No, I'm not.
So the day is saved, right? Wrong. Brocken's head is lying on the ground, but he's like, we may have lost the battle, but victory is ours. The surprise part of the plan was using the rest of Brocken's body to sneak into the lab and just suicide bomb the fucking photon reactor and destroy the shield. Yep, we're fucked.
Yeah, and this was like right before like Koji gave his giant humanity speech, or like how we'll never lose.
Oh yeah, and even after like he beats Ashura with like the point blank breast fire combined with like its self-destruct, yeah, he just uses Bashin Flash to rebuild his entire body in an instant. Yeah, again, this is the most OP Koji that has ever existed.
Jeez. Like everything about it is so like over the top. Like there's nothing about this like manga that's subtle as any, and that's fine. Sometimes things don't need to be subtle.
No, they don't. Yeah, so now like the thing that has been protecting Atami and the rest of Japan from Dr. Hell like just crushing it in an instant, that's now gone. The reason they had to be worried is Bardos Island, much like everything in this manga, has gotten a huge upgrade. No longer just being, just some random island that is like artificial and able to move. Nope, it's now a spaceship. Oh wait, did I say spaceship? I meant transforming mecha.
Yeah, of course it would be.
And aboard this ship/mecha, aboard this Bardos Macross Island, I guess whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Dr. Hell is holding a wake for his two dearest minions. Cute character moment. You're still a piece of shit.
It is funny. It is a funny scene, at least.
Yeah, just just rings the bell. Prays in silence, and then shifts immediately back into hot-blooded yelling about how he is going to atomize every motherfucker in Japan.
Yeah. Like not even like all of the same panel.
And yet, even with his superhuman powers and past experiences, and after even giving that big speech that you were talking about to like basically give everyone hope.
Yeah.
Koji Kabuto is still human and feels fear.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you get a very good character moment of him just having a breakdown, like, in his own privacy, just realizing that it's like, man, I don't even know if I can fucking beat that thing. The Gordon Hell I saw in my flashbacks looks nothing like that. What the fuck am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
Like, being the hero really is hard.
I think it's a nice character moment because it's like, oh yeah, he's still, like you said, he's still human. He still has fears. He's not just... the hot-blooded yelling guy.
Even Saika is able to show up there to kind of give him some comfort. All the same, like as things go on, even if like Koji throughout is still exhibiting his same behavior like he does in any story, where it is still kind of rooted in that 70s it's a man's job kind of attitude. It does a bit more to actually highlight, that attitude is actually stupid. Sayaka is right. Even if it looks like at the time that like she's still getting sidelined, she's still like doing everything she can to get through like Koji's like thick skull. That like, no asshole, I'm going to keep fighting with you to the end. That's what lovers do. Like as we get near the end of this volume, Bardos Island is closing in. It's transformed. It is going to fuck up the photon power lab. But Minerva is using all of her power to combine with the reactor to put up a miniature barrier to protect everyone inside. And as this is happening, she does what needs to be done by finally explaining to our heroes what was it that she has actually been going through, revealing the truth. This is only one of many cycles in time she has been through. Which means time for another movie exposition.
Let's go.
Via Minerva's own memory banks, where you get to see where it all began, with Juzo Kabuto being an asshole mad scientist, basically talking shit at Professor Yumi and his son, Kenzo, by being like, these fucking robots, Iron Z, Energy Z, they're shit. They're all shit. I'm making a robot to surpass these.
And then he just has them fight against each other.
And how he plans to surpass it is basically he built a large-scale photon reactor called Minerva X. This was her original form. It was just a big reactor, didn't have a humanoid form. And because he figured out that photon particles can move through the passage of time, he is like, before I die, I am going to send all of my current research and progress to my past self so that I can get a head start and finish Mazinger Z sooner.
I mean,
and also I'm going to use it to take over the world.
Yeah, that too. That too. Okay, when it comes to time travel plots, I guess just transporting information back in time to your past self using photons or some shit is that's original, I guess. It's definitely
a form of time travel that is like, it becomes more clear like once we get to it later on, but like the idea of like time travel via like transfer of consciousness, I think is the idea behind it. Yeah. In this case, it's more like the main consciousness that's being transferred during all this is Minerva, the big reactor. Yeah. But as Volume 6 starts, it becomes very clear that, we were not kidding when he said he's going to build Mazinger Z and take over the world. Because take over the world he does in about 14 days and 10 hours.
He has the entire world leaders like prostrating over him.
Mm-hmm. Jim Mazinger included.
Yep.
But even as they're watching it, it's like, this gets back to how these mangaka really know how to merge the serious dramatics with absurdity, because when Koji and friends realize that they're going to be sitting here a while getting all this information, they're like, all right, no matter how bad or dark this looks, let's get our popcorn and watch. Everyone, watch the screen. Eat your fucking popcorn.
Yeah, they just bring out a barrel of popcorn for everybody to watch this terrible backstory. It's so fucking ridiculous.
Koji, Sayaka, Professor Yumi, Shiro, all of them are there. Just like, it's a big old watch party as the end of the world is happening outside. That said, like, what happens when Juzo succeeds at taking over the world? What he realizes is that this shit was too easy. Minerva, I want you to take this information and send it back to me in the past, except send it to everyone in the world so that they can give me a challenge. And do not tell my past self that you did this. And that's how we get Dr. Hell involved in this, because he discovers the plans on how to make super robots, uses that technology to revive the mechanical beasts, and then that's how you get not Koji versus Dr. Hell, but rather Juzo versus Dr. Hell. Which is, I think, best emphasized by the brawl between Mazinger and Garda K7, juxtaposed by Juzo and Hell having an old man wrestling fight, calling each other old farts. They really are made for each other.
Yeah, is this what they mean when they say old man yowie? Is this old man yowie?
I don't know. Honestly, my favorite detail during this entire timeline is that Dr. Hell's outfit is just the most unprofessional shit ever.
Yeah.
Like Juzo and Hell both have lab coats, but Juzo at least looks like the proper scientist because he has the tie and dress shirt and everything. But what does Dr. Hell have under that lab coat? Just a t-shirt and pinstripe pajama pants.
Yeah, the pajama.
Motherfucker does not have a real job.
He's just playing part-time and being a mad scientist.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why he's so swole later on.
Yeah, and this at least leads to some genius big brain shit right here with the plot, where Dr. Hell and Juzo Kabuto's feud becomes so huge that like Dr. Hell, kind of similar to how Juzo felt at the end of his original cycle of world conquest, was like, just taking over the rest of the world isn't going to be worth it unless I overcome this one challenge. Let me take on Mazinger Z and only Mazinger Z, and I will commit no more acts of terrorism. So you get fucking robot wrestling matches that air every Sunday at 7 p.m., more than likely the same time slot that the original Mazinger Z anime aired at. And it is broadcast for everyone around the world to see. Merchandise gets made with all the funds going to like relief efforts. There's a fucking Miss Mazinger pageant that is held. Unsurprisingly, Minerva X is the only winner.
Yeah. It is the most galaxy brain shit. Like, how do you come up with this?
And another bit of meta genius, I think, that's on the part of this particular story arc is that we forgot to mention this version of Mazinger Z. It does not have a pilot. It actually has an artificial brain, which means it's technically in the same category as super robots as something like Tenshin 28. Which you then start to see things change where this is where Koji comes in and starts to like impart like some meaningful character development on Juzo, who's otherwise been a self-absorbed mad scientist who's like, fuck Dr. Hell, I don't want that old piece of shit to get the better of me. That during one of the fights where Mazinger Z's artificial brain is being like scrambled because of Dr. Hell's like latest mechanical beast, Koji decides to be very ballsy and is like, I want to fight Dr. Hell too. Fuck that asshole. I'm going to get inside Mazinger Z and control it somehow. And he does.
And he almost causes a lot more destruction, but...
Yeah, it even leads into like a recreation of like, well, it's more like a summary of what happened in the first few chapters of the original Mazinger Z anime, where the first time Koji did control Mazinger, it did go out of control, and it took like Aphrodite aid to like stop it. So that's basically where this story starts to turn more into Koji and Mazinger are made for each other, and things start to change in Juzo as he realizes that, like, as much as he's been so self-absorbed in his research and proving he's a better scientist than Dr. Hell, almost obliviously, Koji doesn't see it that way. He is, like, praising his grandpa, thinking he is the coolest guy ever because of, like, the robot he made, and wants to make sure that Mazinger will never lose ever. It's so, like, heartwarming, especially as it gets closer to the end when you realize, yeah, all this time and all these timelines of like Juzo has cancer. He's gonna die no matter what, but he's gonna keep plugging away at his research, that even when he sees Mazinger like actually lose for real, you know, that's when his change of heart fully sets in, that he is like, all right, forget world conquest. This is the ultimate Mazinger I want to have sent back in time and built so that it can never lose. Minerva X, I entrust this to you. Unfortunately, the tragedy starts when, you know, well, two things. A, Minerva goes back in time before realizing that in the chaos, Koji got picked up by his dad, Tetsuya, and Jun, who had been off in secret building Great Mazinger, which, if he had just gotten in Great Mazinger, got back in the fight, and trounced Dr. Hell's forces right there, things could have continued. But no, it got reset. And Minerva forgot in this instance that going back in time meant going back to the moment when Juzo Kabuto was a fucking asshole. It's like you said in the notes, now she is going to be stuck in the worst version of Groundhog's Day imaginable.
Pretty much, yeah.
That said, though, I actually thought about it a bit more, because rereading this manga and this particular, like, story arc, this timeline, it got me thinking, if you excise the time travel shit completely and just had this cycle as its own manga, I actually think it would have been really great, because I was starting to think about all the ways the story could have gone when Great Mazinger gets introduced, while still retaining, you know, all the involvement with Minerva X, and thinking about it in the same way that, like, Minerva X is Mazinger Z's partner. Yeah. And ostensibly, that means he's her only partner. I imagine there would actually be like a great sense of like strife that could come up as part of the story and tension, where after Juzo dies, Mazinger is destroyed, and Great Mazinger enters the fray, that Minerva would have like a despair, villainous kind of like character turn, where she is like, what the fuck is this imposter? This is not my Mazinger.
I can definitely see that. They could have just made that the entire series as well, or like fit in like the entire Great Mazinger story in a way. It's definitely a second way this story could have gone.
But instead, what happens is that Minerva goes back in time. She tries her best to hide like the information that probably Juzo in the future understandably thought that his past self would look at it and go, yes, I am going to design this thing and make it the most evil robot possible. Turns out Juzo in the past was way smarter than Juzo in the future gave himself credit for. So he made Mazinger Z, activated it, and it crushes Juzo in a very classic, the mad scientist is ended by his own creation.
Yep.
And then the cycle proceeds to get repeated over and over. Eventually, Minerva X, her origin at the original reactor gets cut off because Dr. Hell steals the original plans and builds her on Bardo's Island, which means she is no longer able to send information back to that specific point. We are stuck with Mazinger Z now. What the fuck do we do? Cuts to trying to figure things out with Professor Yumi, where he is at his like most extreme emotions ever.
Yeah, this is the most he's ever shown in any Mazinger media.
He's otherwise very stoic, but you get to see him like in absolute despair as he is like unsure about how to solve Minerva's conundrum as far as like sending photon energy back in time now that the original link has been severed. But then cut to the next cycle, where he is now a laughing mad scientist, where he has finally figured it out, where all you really need to do is send a person's essence back in time through photonic energy, and that'll have the same effect. It doesn't need to just be Minerva that goes back in time. It is someone that is hit with with an ability that could break a person down to those atomic particles, like Rust Hurricane. That's all you need to do. And I love that how Yumi demonstrates this is that he has on the whiteboard a little doodle of grown-up Yumi, arrow pointing to baby Yumi, pacifier and all, even though he still has glasses and the beard. And it's that's how the theory works. And that's how you get the information of how Koji gets sent back in time constantly, because this explains why Minerva always uses Rust Hurricane on Koji when things go wrong. Because of Koji's importance and his connection to Mazinger, that means using Rust Hurricane on him is the effect that has the most likely chance of changing the timeline. So as they get near the end of this finally, Dr. Hell is still clearly bored on Bardo's Island, that he is having a solo banquet as Iron Masks are performing a classical music performance for him. Again, cute character touch, still an evil piece of shit.
This is very much a giant cartoon villain thing, but whatever, he's already a giant cartoon villain, so it works.
A giant cartoon villain who is buff as shit.
Hell, I don't.
And now the fight really starts.
Yeah.
The scale of this fight, it's stupidly huge. But, I mean, again, we're already in the late 2000s by this point. This is post Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. Every anime and manga made in the genre has to treat this like it's the new normal. It is so insane. You look at the scale difference between Mazinger Z and Gordon Hell, it's Mazinger Z is literally, in terms of relative size, is like an insect in comparison. This
is literally some kind of Shadow of the Colossus shit. This is the most giant version of Gordon Hell, and it feels like a JRPG final boss. Its scale.
Also, I could totally see it being a Colossus in that game.
Yeah.
It definitely fits in terms of weird humanoid shapes, but at least you get to see Koji briefly try a plan to get closer to Gordon Hell and where Dr. Hell is possibly positioned, which is in the head. Surprise hostage situation, or head stitch as the pun tries to go for, with Count Brocken's head in Koji's clutches. But he's not fazed by this. He does have a great line though, where he says, "You claim to stand for justice. How dare you do such a thing? Coward, you'll make your fans cry." Nice
meta commentary there.
What? Even though it's what fans? All of his fans are gonna fucking die at the end of this.
Yeah, they're all gonna. What do you mean, bro?
It's also very disheartening for Count Brocken, because he realizes not only is Dr. Hell still going to go through with destroying Mazinger, but Dr. Hell also exclaims the reason he made Ashura and Brocken in the first place the way that they were is because he thought it was funny. Yeah. And that all he needs to do in the future is just make more funny-looking minions.
And then we get...
What an asshole!
Seriously, and then we get flashes of later Mazinger villains or Great Mazinger, and it's just he really doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, you get Pygmalion or whatever his name was, the weird shaman that appeared in the original anime. And then I find it funny he brings up Archduke Gorgon of all things, because it was bro, I already know where Gorgon comes from. It's you did not make him. You would never be able to make him.
Yeah,
if you did, you would spell your own fucking doom, because he would bring his buddies home. But as the fight goes on and the despair is piling up, you get one of the most emotionally powerful things that kind of highlights, I think it's a good indication of just how different this version of Mazinger in this timeline was compared to all the others, where all the others were very quick to just evolve into Zero and destroy the world. That Minerva kind of clues into the fact that the only reason it could not have happened any sooner is because Z in this universe, for whatever reason, doesn't want to. Because he gives Koji a much needed pep talk in all caps, verbatim. "My friend, don't give up. I am strong. We are strong. We can become God or the devil. Recognize no being greater than Z. Z is unique and almighty. I will smite evil with you."
It is so fucking cool because like by now like we've already have a bunch of like mecha series that have like dealt with the idea of evolving mechs or like sentient mechs, and I love that this is Mazinger's version of that. It is like the biggest bro that just screams inspirational quotes at you and tells you, I'm here with you, bro. We'll fucking smite evil together.
It's like over all these timeline resets and whatnot, like the thing that has imparted on Z itself is a will, and that will is in 100% sync with Koji's will, while still being identifiable as its own entity. Like, Mazinger Z will smite evil, and Koji will smite evil. Therefore, they are friends made for each other.
Yeah.
And that's when you finally get Mazinger Z's black boxes factoring into the fight, which are starting to activate one by one, but not to the point where all 7 activated once and turned it into 0. Like, you mentioned in your notes that, like, it looked like he was that Koji was basically pulling out a part from him that looked like his heart, because this gets into a bit of Hinduism where, like, the idea is that the black boxes, and in terms of, particularly when Koji is piloting Mazinger in that instance, is that their placements, like, coincide with, like, the traditional, like, chakras of, like, Hinduism. So, like, it's why they're, like, in that specific line formation going up from his abdomen to his head. So he's not pulling out an organ, like, the black boxes are manifesting in Koji's cyborg body, and in order to keep them from, like, triggering the chain reaction of black box activation from going out of control, he is just grabbing each one and crushing it so that he can just buy Mazinger more time, use those powers that are afforded to it, but without using the last power that would turn it into a demon god.
Yeah, that is I would not have thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense that they'd have, like, some kind of symbolism related to them.
Granted, there was a flashback where the 3 professors actually described that very same concept, so that's how I knew.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I probably would not have caught on to that either.
Yeah.
But I mean, the mental image of someone as hot-blooded as Koji Kabuto pulling out a part of his body like Musashi's fucking last stand.
Yeah, it's raw shit is what it is.
And the fact that he does it 6 goddamn times.
Yeah.
But at least during all this, you know, you still get some lines from Z, all of which are, like, worthy quotes. But the one that, like, sticks out the best is where he just goes, "All light become my power." What a fucking fantastic thing to say as you are just absorbing photonic energy for a big ass attack.
Yeah.
Oh man. This leads us into getting to volume 8, where the fight just keeps escalating. There's actually not too much, like, individual moments that stand out, because this is where the manga kind of gets into a point where we described this much. If we were in a position where we were following these chapters as they were getting published, like, each month or something, where you would start to feel it being kind of agonizing, is like, oh my god, when is victory going to come? When is this fight going to end?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's stopping. But it's like, things that do kind of stick out, admittedly, are there's a flashback to before this final fight actually happens involving Honey, where she shows up teasing Koji and Sayaka for being lovebirds, asks for a moment of Koji's time before just giving him a big old smooch on the lips.
And you could imagine the reaction Sayaka had to that.
Though she knows full well that it's like, Honey's not going to steal Koji. There's no way that she could, like, break up that relationship. She only did that as a way of, like, transferring energy from her airborne element fixation device to Koji, you know, so he would have, like, enough spare energy on hand to, like, repair his body if he got, like, a very serious injury, such as from pulling 6 black boxes out of his fucking body at one, like, one after the other. But it does make me think, Go Nagai, before you leave this world, please give us a proper Mazinger Cutie Honey crossover manga, please.
Please. I think we deserve...
How has there never been one?
I'm shocked there has never been a crossover between the two. I feel like there should have been, like, at least a movie or like an OVA.
Yeah, we've had Mazinger and Devilman. Like, why not these two? Like, I wouldn't even need it to have the giant robot battles in it. Just have, like, a conceit where Honey Kisaragi is a transfer student at Koji's school and just get up to all kinds of hijinks. Like, you could even have Koji fighting Panther Claw and all that shit. Like, getting in on the Cutie Honey action. Like, that'd be fun. Outside of that moment, the other, like, standout part of this volume is Sayaka's finest hour, actually. After being shown yet again that Koji is always just going to charge head first and not let anyone else follow him into battle. Because as it turns out, after what Minerva told him, he is fully aware that, like, one of the conditions that causes Z to instantly turn into Zero, like just trigger all 7 black boxes at once, is when something tragic happens to Koji, like losing the person that he loves most, which would be Sayaka.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads into Sayaka breaking through the photon barrier, you know, while still keeping it active, flying after Koji to save Mazinger as it is falling from, like, a fatal wound, and, like, basically telling Koji straight to his face that, like, you didn't want me to get involved because you thought if I died, Z would go out of control and destroy the world. Mm-hmm. But that's just a sign that you are not strong enough to handle such a responsibility. Like, you would lose sight of yourself if I died, but I wouldn't if you did.
Which, damn.
That's, like, the pep talk needed to convince him finally that, like, you're right. We're going to fight together. Yeah. Even if this is an impossible battle, I'd rather die with you. And you just get, like, some fantastic, like, full page, even 2-page panels as, like, both of them are charging forward, like, hands, like, fingers interlocked between their robots as they are charging headfirst with the power of love as, like, another attempt to, like, deal a dent in Gordon Hell's, like, might. It's a strong emotional moment. Too bad. Gordon Hell is still invincible at this time.
Yeah, it still doesn't do anything, but it's a good attempt. It's a really good scene that just doesn't amount to much in the end, but that's fine.
But that's fine, because Volume 9 is when we finally get our much-needed catharsis. Oh, this is it. This is where everything comes together.
Oh, yeah.
It is, by all accounts, I describe it as such, it is 100% a Deus Ex Machina. Like, this is a miracle of miracles happening. Mm-hmm. And it's something I like to call every Koji everywhere all at once. I am pretty sure I am the only person to have ever come up with that joke in reference to that movie title. You are welcome.
Probably. Well, it fits. It's accurate for this scene.
Because what happens is Dr. Hell's Big Bang Punch, which is what he tries to do, going up into space before just launching down with a punch to land on Mount Fuji and just eviscerate all of Japan and the Photon Power Labs. Like, everyone starts seeing white when it happens until they realize, shit, I'm not dead. Holy shit, Dr. Hell's Big Bang Punch just got stopped. What the hell was that? Turns out every Koji from past cycles with their Mazingers, like, those memories still exist across time and multiverses as photonic energy, and are now beginning to materialize one by one. Like, the manga and Shin Mazinger Z anime, like, I guess another example of, like, how there are very subtle similarities between them, or I guess not so subtle in this case, is that the anime has a similar ending where it is, like, it's like hundreds upon hundreds of rocket punches just raining down on Dr. Hell, with just to symbolize, like, the combined hopes and efforts of everyone in the world joining Koji to stop Dr. Hell. This is that equivalent for the manga, except this is Koji, everyone in the world, and every other version of Koji that failed in their timeline. Just all appearing at once. Especially when you get more elaboration on that flashback with Honey prior to the big fight, where she wasn't the only one that showed up to give something special to Koji. How about the Aztec star given by the hero of a 70s tokusatsu show called Aztec Kaiser? Or the Abashiri family with their psychic powers. Or shelters from around the world giving Koji their energy DBZ Spirit Bomb style.
Yeah, this just like...
Which, by the way, I have to get back to. This is what I was kind of talking about, where I needed to explain with Aztec Kaiser specifically, and how when I finally discovered, like, what this was in reference to, it made me discover something that I wish was fully fan-subbed in some way. Because, yes, this is one of the few things Go Nagai has ever worked on that was a live-action production. Aztec Kaiser was a mid-70s tokusatsu show all built around pro wrestling.
Oh, fuck.
Where, imagine a pro wrestling plot where an evil, like, supervillain pro wrestling organization is causing trouble in official pro wrestling leagues, that a superhero wrestler called Aztec Kaiser, who is in like a full body suit getup, comes in to like fight the monster of the week, or in this case the wrestler of the week, and his gimmick is that he has the Aztec star embedded in his mask, which gives him the power to turn the show at any point into an anime. Where he does fantastical wrestling moves that could never be done in an actual live venue.
Oh my
and that's
God.
how he defeats the wrestler of the week. I have seen that there are like the first few episodes that have subtitles and are uploaded on YouTube. I believe there are 26 episodes in total, and I want this whole thing translated, damn it, because it is amazing.
Yo, where the fuck are all the subtitles for this? Get on this, subbers. This sounds incredible. More people should experience. I want to experience this. Jesus Christ.
I want to experience this too, especially because, like, if you love everything about how hilariously, like, cheap and purposely low budget 70s tokusatsu productions are, with all their camera tricks and special effects, it is like, if you love that stuff, this should be up your alley, especially if you also have a fondness for pro wrestling, of which I have several friends who are way deep in the pro wrestling rabbit hole more than I am. But, I mean, they'd certainly get a kick out of at least the concept behind it. So, yes, the Aztec Star, it makes sense that being given an artifact like that, which has such reality warping powers, would be a contributing factor in every Koji everywhere all at once manifesting. So with this miracle on display, you gotta have it lead into one last special attack that can seal the deal, right?
Oh boy.
You know, because finally there is something that can deal with Gordon Hell, fucking repel that gigantic ship into space. You know, initially, Dr. Hell thinks, ha, you dumbass, you made a mistake. I designed Gordon Hell so that it could conquer the rest of the universe. It's made for space. What the fuck do you think you're gonna do? Cut to every Koji saying one after the other, I wouldn't be so sure of that. As they swarm, like, form a sphere. It's like the same thing that, like, honeybees do to, like, cook a Japanese hornet alive, where they just, like, form an entire sphere. And that's basically what they do, because, behold, dynamic fire nova. Everyone breast fires in, like, a spherical fashion and cooks Gordon Hell and Dr. Hell alive.
It rules.
Holy shit.
It got me thinking of, man, I am so sad that Mazinger Z will never, like, be represented properly in SRW game, because, for obvious reasons, because imagine this attack being animated in its style.
Oh, there is at least when you read the sequel manga, part of the reason, like, why the ending is so amazing is because when you see how the finale plays out, it will make you think of, man, this is straight up Super Robot Wars.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. Just, oh, what a fantastic finale. Even so, in like, when you get to this part of the manga, just the fear showing up in Dr. Hell's eyes as he finally realized that, like, something that is by all metrics should be impossible is actually being made possible, because during this whole point, Minerva X has basically described what I was talking about, where all the timeline shit in this story takes place on, like, an XY graph, you know? Like, one axis is all of the Kojis across all the different, like, you know, like, the what would be considered the actual time axis, combined with all of the different Mazingers across the different universe axes. And that's how they're able to do it. That's how they're able to end Dr. Hell once and for all. You get some truly beautiful, like full page panels as you get to, like, the very last page, as, you know, surprisingly, like, every major character that you would care about, like, this is the important thing to remember, despite how overwhelmingly grimdark this was at times, the core cast of Mazinger Z, not a single one of them in this timeline is dead at the end of it.
Yeah, that's...
Koji's still fine. Sayaka's fine. Boss is fine. Everyone is alive and able to appreciate their one true hero, their super robot, Mazinger Z.
And I think this is what I kind of appreciated about this entire manga, is because it feels like it kind of rejects the idea of nihilism, because everything is absolutely turbo fucked. It is so bad, but there's still a sense of hope that drives everyone forward. And like just seeing everybody like even hoping even near the end, and like things still work out, is kind of inspirational in a way. I don't know.
Like, but that after this point, that efforts, because of the fact that, like, the photon power labs throughout this entire cycle has managed to still, stay standing. They, like, Professor Yumi, the 3 professors, all of the scientific geniuses that are still left alive in this sanctuary, they have everything at their disposal to, like, it's not a case where they're like, well, we won, but at what cost? Now we have to, like, live with the fact that the rest of the Earth is a fucking wasteland. It's like, no, they have photon energy. Yeah. They're going to use this to rebuild the world back to the way it was before Dr. Hell started this stuff. Like, it is so clear with, like, the power of, like, the super robots and energy they have on their side that, like, everything about the world can be healed in no time. Yeah. Now that there is not the looming threat of danger overhead. It is, like, this is the catharsis. This is the hope that you were waiting for across 9 entire volumes. Yeah. Hoping to see Mazinger Z triumph, not just against Dr. Hell, but against itself and its darker nature.
And yeah, like once you get to the end, it's like you feel it. You feel what everybody's gone through, and like you feel relief for all of them. You're glad it all worked out somehow. And things are looking better until the sequel manga.
Well, yeah, because you gotta have great Mazinger factor into it.
Yeah.
But and I guess we kind of glossed over it because of how hype everything else was. But I gotta give props to the way everyone cheers on Koji and gives them their energy rather than just holding both their hands up like in DBZ. Yeah, you just hold out your fist like you're doing a rocket punch.
They all just hold
that is, I was questioning at some point, it's like, has anyone ever tried to formalize that as like a type of fan salute between Mazinger fans? Part of me thinks someone probably did, but I would also not be surprised, especially with how it might look depending on the angle, if it could send across the wrong message.
Yeah. It is pretty cool when it's on the manga, though. It is incredibly hype.
Yeah, because you can at least read the core idea of it as far as, like, cheering on with, like, raised fists. Like, it's a symbol of, like, fighting strength. Yeah. Which is what everyone is expressing. Even if Koji is the only one in the robot that can do it, everyone else is exhibiting that same sense of justice. What a good fucking manga.
What a good manga.
Even with the rough start at the beginning, it sure pulls its way to, like, really drive home, like, such a powerful fucking story. It's funny at times, it's pervy at times, it's kind of dark at times, but it is triumphant all the way to the end.
It does not, like, thankfully, it does not stay the same tone as it did in the first volume. It really does improve after that.
It was so fun to talk about this.
It was a fun time. I'm glad we read this. I'm glad we decided to talk about this today.
Yeah, for the first a few episodes in this podcast where we talk about a manga, and even the time that we thought it would take to prepare for this, honestly, not too bad.
Not too bad at all.
Yeah, that's basically it for Shin Mazinger Zero. All this shit sounds absolutely crazy, and if you were listening to this without having read it, it's like, don't let all of our insane spoilers dissuade you. Reading it still needs to happen, because we can only convey so much in words. You got to see how it looks in images, in comic panels, and just realize how well the intensity is conveyed. Hopefully, even if it's not like an official episode, like maybe someday you can get around to reading Shin Mazinger Zero versus the Great General of Darkness.
Oh yeah,
and we can have this type of discussion all over again.
Oh yeah,
because I want to get your thoughts on the moments that resonate so well, because I feel like if they struck a chord with me, I know that they will for you.
Oh, I will absolutely be into it whenever I get around to it. But I definitely will, because it's
definitely,
if it's like this, it's going to be an easy read.
Definitely. It's like a few more volumes. Like I think it's only 12 volumes, but I'm pretty sure like with how paperback, tankobon releases are for manga, it's like those are typically like in the 200 page average. So it's probably more like about like 4 to 5 chapters on average per volume. So it's not too bad.
That's makes
you like if you get gripped by it, you'll keep going.
Yeah.
And that obviously goes for audiences at home. You people listening to this podcast. If you read this manga, read Versus the Great General of Darkness and just be ready for all that shit. Holy hell. Especially like if you get through it, it might give you a bit more context for like certain things that were featured in these in the international trilogy of Super Robot Wars, because not the entire story of Shin Mazinger Zero, as we mentioned, was ever like replicated because it would straight up be impossible.
Yeah.
But there are at least aspects of Zero that show up in those games where if by chance you played those games and experienced Zero that way, reading the rest of the entire manga's saga will help elucidate why Zero is the way that it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least for the next several episodes of this podcast, we're going to be switching gears back to, doing anime as usual. And in fact, you know what? Just to keep things like in line with the fact that we started with a Mazinger manga of all things that started in 2009, I'm going to establish it right now. One of the few times we're just going to straight up announce what our next episode is. It's Shin Mazinger Z.
Yo.
I think it's only fair that we complement this manga with the other anime that like went on air around the same time as it.
Yeah.
Because it'd be good to get a nice contrast to just how similar in intent in some ways it kind of is, but also very, very different.
It's very different. But yes, this is probably one of the few times this will ever happen. So cherish it, folks.
And it's a good thing too, because I have also been waiting anxiously for the right time to talk about my favorite mecha anime of all time.
Going to be a good time.
All right. Thanks again for being on, Neff. Thanks everyone at home for listening to this fucking monster of a spoiler chat for an insane manga. Look forward to Shin Mazinger Z, the anime, as our topic for next week.
Also, since you've listened this far of the podcast, why don't you just Mazin go to subscribe to our channel?
Majin Flash!
Brand new